What happened in front of Riverside Tech Corp's glass towers that morning left everyone frozen in disbelief. It was supposed to be a regular workday where executives rushed through the lobby with their briefcases and assistants balanced laptops in one hand and coffee in the other. Nobody could have guessed that the quietest person connected to the company, a cleaner's young son, was about to shake the entire building with a single sentence. At the heart of it all stood Jonathan Hayes, the CEO of Riverside Tech. Known for his polished suits, sharp eyes, and reputation for being one of the toughest leaders in the industry, Jonathan walked with a rhythm of authority. He had just finished a high-level meeting and was heading toward his sleek black car that waited in the reserved parking bay. Employees who passed by lowered their voices. Everyone knew when Jonathan was around, you stayed sharp. But just as Jonathan reached out to open his car door, the silence of the morning was split in half by a desperate shout. "Don't get in the car!" Every head in the parking lot turned. Startled, Jonathan paused mid-step, his hand hovering above the handle. The voice had come from a boy, Marcus, the 12-year-old son of Angela, one of the cleaning staff. His face was pale, his body trembling, but his voice carried urgency. Angela, who had been pushing her cleaning cart nearby, froze in horror. "Marcus," she hissed, rushing forward to grab him. "What are you doing? Stop that right now!" Whispers broke out among the employees standing nearby. Some frowned, some chuckled nervously, and others simply stared in disbelief. A cleaner's son yelling at the CEO? This had to be some kind of mistake. Jonathan, however, didn't move. His instincts, sharpened from years of business rivalries and boardroom betrayals, told him this wasn't random. Slowly, he turned his gaze on Marcus. "Why shouldn't I get in the car?" he asked, his tone calm but commanding. Marcus swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the black vehicle. His small hands clenched tightly at his sides as he whispered, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Because I saw someone under it last night." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Angela's knees nearly gave way. Employees shifted uneasily, glancing at the CEO's car as though it had suddenly transformed from a symbol of power into something dangerous. Jonathan straightened, studying Marcus carefully. The boy wasn't joking. He wasn't smiling. His words carried fear and truth. The CEO's next move would decide everything. For a moment, silence wrapped the entire parking lot. The only sound was the faint hum of the city beyond the glass towers. Dozens of employees stood frozen, coffee cups halfway to their lips, briefcases dangling loosely at their sides. Angela's face burned with embarrassment as she tried to drag Marcus back. "Sir, I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice shaking. "He doesn't know what he's saying. Please forgive him. He didn't mean..." But Jonathan Hayes did not move toward his car. He didn't brush off the words. Instead, he fixed his sharp gaze on the boy. His instincts whispered that this moment was not to be ignored. "Marcus," Jonathan said firmly, his deep voice cutting through the murmurs. "What exactly did you see?" The boy's hands trembled as he pointed toward the car. "I couldn't sleep last night, so I came outside while Mom was working. I saw a man. He was crawling near your car. He put something under it. I didn't know what to do. I was too scared to tell anyone until now." Gasps spread across the crowd like wildfire. Employees exchanged uneasy glances. One woman whispered, "Did he just say someone put something under the car?" Angela's knees wobbled as she clutched her son tightly. Her heart raced, terrified not only for the CEO, but also for Marcus. She feared Jonathan would see her son's warning as childish nonsense, or worse, a disrespectful interruption. But Jonathan did not dismiss him. His expression sharpened with suspicion. He slowly stepped back from the car, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. Turning toward the head of security, who had just rushed out of the building, he commanded, "Check the vehicle, now." The guard immediately crouched down, his flashlight sweeping across the undercarriage of the luxury car. Everyone held their breath, waiting. A tense 30 seconds passed, stretching into eternity. Finally, the guard's voice rang out, firm but trembling. "Sir, there's something attached underneath." The crowd erupted into stunned whispers. A few gasped audibly while others covered their mouths. Angela's grip on Marcus tightened as she whispered prayers under her breath. Jonathan's jaw clenched. He stared at the vehicle, then back at the boy who had stopped him. His usual commanding aura was still there, but beneath it, a flicker of realization glimmered. Marcus might have just saved his life. The once normal morning at Riverside Tech had suddenly turned into something none of them would ever forget. The security guard's words sent a chill across the parking lot. Something's attached underneath. Employees stepped back instinctively, forming a cautious circle around the car. Fear rippled through the crowd. Angela held Marcus close, her hands trembling as though she could shield him from the weight of the moment. Jonathan Hayes, however, didn't flinch. Years of handling high-stakes negotiations had taught him how to remain calm under pressure. He gave a sharp nod. "Clear the area. Carefully remove whatever it is." Two more guards rushed forward with gloves and tools. Every second seemed to drag. The only sounds were the clicking of the tools and the nervous shuffling of employees who couldn't look away. Finally, one of the guards lifted a small device into view. It was a dark, wired object, no bigger than a lunchbox. Strange wires looped across its surface, and a tiny blinking light glowed faintly. Gasps filled the air. Someone whispered, "Is that a bomb?" Another muttered, "It looks like a tracker." Or worse. Angela covered Marcus's eyes instinctively, but he wriggled free to look. His voice was barely above a whisper. "That's what I saw. That's what he put under there." The device was quickly secured and handed to local authorities who had just arrived on the scene. Their grim expressions confirmed what everyone feared. This wasn't harmless. It was deliberate. Jonathan's gaze swept the crowd before settling on Angela and Marcus. The boy's face was pale but determined, his eyes locked on the device as though to prove he hadn't been mistaken. "How did you know to stop me?" Jonathan asked, his voice low but firm. Marcus hesitated, then said, "Because I remembered his shoes. Last night when I saw him, he ran away. This morning I saw those same shoes again, on someone walking into the building." A ripple of shock moved through the employees. The implication was terrifying. Whoever had planted the device wasn't a stranger lurking in the shadows. He was one of them, inside Riverside Tech. Angela's heart sank, torn between fear for her son and gratitude that he had spoken up. She looked at Jonathan nervously, expecting anger or disbelief. But instead, the CEO's eyes softened ever so slightly. In front of dozens of stunned employees, Jonathan Hayes, the unshakable CEO, quietly admitted to himself, this child had just saved his life. And in that moment, the balance of power in Riverside Tech shifted forever. By the time police secured the suspicious device, the once busy parking lot had transformed into a scene of tension and whispers. Employees who had moments earlier rushed to their offices now lingered, wide-eyed and restless, desperate to know the truth. Jonathan Hayes stood tall, his sharp eyes fixed on the investigators who examined the wires and blinking light. Though outwardly calm, inside he replayed Marcus's words. "I saw those same shoes again, on someone walking into the building." He turned to his head of security. "Find out who entered this morning wearing those shoes." His tone was clipped, leaving no room for hesitation. Within minutes, cameras were pulled from the lobby entrance. Footage revealed a figure slipping into the building just after dawn, an executive in a gray suit, his polished shoes strikingly familiar. The image froze on the screen, and the crowd collectively gasped. It was Daniel Cross, Riverside Tech's chief operating officer. Angela clutched Marcus tighter, unable to believe someone so high-ranking could be involved. Employees exchanged horrified whispers. Daniel had worked alongside Jonathan for years, always in the spotlight, always appearing loyal. The realization hit like a thunderbolt. Betrayal had been brewing inside the walls of the company all along. Police quickly entered the building to confront him. Within minutes, Daniel was escorted out in handcuffs, his face pale, his once confident posture gone. As he passed through the crowd, Daniel sneered, his eyes locking briefly on Jonathan. You were never untouchable, Hayes. Not everyone believes in your empire. Gasps followed his words, but Jonathan didn't flinch. Instead, he turned slightly, his eyes moving toward Marcus. The boy stood small among the towering adults, but at that moment, he seemed larger than life. If not for Marcus's warning, Jonathan realized, Daniel's plan might have succeeded, and more than his life, the trust and stability of the company would have been shattered forever. Angela felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent years cleaning floors, often unnoticed, often treated as invisible. Yet now her son, the child of a cleaner, had just uncovered a conspiracy that none of the executives with all their resources and authority had seen coming. For the first time in Riverside Tech's history, the line between hierarchy and humanity blurred. Everyone, from assistants to top managers, stared at Marcus not as a cleaner's child, but as the reason their CEO was still alive. Jonathan Hayes, once known for his icy composure, felt something stir inside him that he hadn't allowed in years. Humility. And with it came the certainty that nothing in Riverside Tech would ever be the same. The echoes of Daniel Cross's arrest lingered long after he was taken away. Riverside Tech, usually buzzing with the rhythm of keyboards and phone calls, now carried a weighty silence. Whispers trailed through the halls, employees replaying the shocking scene in their minds. The COO in handcuffs, the cleaner's son saving the CEO. Angela sat in a small office on the top floor, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. She had never been in the executive suites before. Everything, the sleek chairs, the polished wooden desk, the panoramic view of the city, felt like another world, one she didn't belong in. Her heart pounded with fear. She hadn't stopped thinking about Marcus's outburst. What if it had embarrassed the CEO? What if she lost her job over this? The only income she had to care for her son? The sound of the door opening startled her. Jonathan Hayes entered, his tall frame filling the room with authority. Angela immediately stood, nervously wiping her palms against her uniform. Sir, she began shakily, I want to apologize. Marcus didn't mean to cause trouble. He's just a boy, and I'll make sure it never happens again. Jonathan raised his hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence. His eyes, usually sharp and distant, held something softer now. Angela, he said firmly, your son didn't cause trouble. He saved my life. Her breath caught. For a moment she couldn't speak, couldn't even believe the words coming from the man who led an empire. Jonathan stepped closer, his voice calm but filled with weight. I've spent years surrounded by experts, advisors, and executives. Yet none of them saw what your boy saw. It took courage to shout out in front of everyone, to speak when others would have stayed silent. Marcus peeked out from behind his mother's arm, his big eyes nervous but curious. Jonathan knelt slightly, lowering himself to meet the boy's gaze. You were brave, Marcus. Braver than most adults I know, Jonathan said. And because of you, I get to stand here today. A small smile flickered on Marcus's face. Angela's eyes welled with tears as her son, so often overlooked, was recognized by the most powerful man in the building. In that quiet office, something shifted. Angela no longer felt like a cleaner standing before a CEO. She felt like a mother whose son had proven his worth in the most extraordinary way. And Jonathan Hayes, who had built walls of steel around his emotions for years, realized those walls had just cracked, thanks to the voice of a 12-year-old boy. The following morning, Riverside Tech was buzzing like never before. News of the COO's arrest had already spread beyond the company walls. Local media circled the story, headlines flashing about betrayal, sabotage, and an unexpected young hero. Inside the building, employees whispered in every corner. Who would have thought a cleaner's son would uncover a scheme that nearly cost the CEO his life? There was nervousness in the air, but also a strange sense of pride. Something monumental had happened within their workplace. That morning, an unusual announcement came over the intercom. All staff were to gather in the main hall for an urgent address from the CEO. The crowd assembled quickly, curiosity filling the massive room. Jonathan Hayes stood at the front, tall and composed, but there was a quiet intensity in his expression. To his right stood Angela, clutching Marcus's hand, both looking uncomfortable under the gaze of hundreds of employees. Jonathan's voice carried easily across the hall as he began. Yesterday, this company faced something no one could have anticipated. A betrayal from within, an attempt to bring harm not only to me, but to the values we stand for. Murmurs rippled through the employees, but Jonathan lifted his hand, silencing them. His eyes turned toward Angela and Marcus. And yet, in that moment of danger, it wasn't an executive, a manager, or even security who saved the day. It was this boy, Marcus. All eyes shifted to the 12-year-old who gripped his mother's hand tightly. A wave of applause broke out, starting slowly and then growing stronger. Marcus's face turned red, and Angela whispered softly, "It's okay, baby." Jonathan let the applause fade before continuing. Marcus had the courage to speak up when others would have stayed silent. His bravery saved my life, and it saved this company from disaster. For that, I owe him more than words. He paused, scanning the crowd, then spoke with conviction. Starting today, I am creating the Marcus Hayes Future Leaders Scholarship, a full fund dedicated to ensuring his education and future will never be limited by circumstance. No child with courage and vision should ever go unnoticed. Gasps echoed through the room, followed by thunderous applause. Marcus's eyes widened in shock, his young mind struggling to process the life-changing gift just bestowed upon him. But Jonathan wasn't finished. He turned to Angela. And as for Angela, she has worked tirelessly in these halls, often overlooked, often invisible to those who pass her by. That ends today. She will no longer be cleaning floors. Instead, she will be joining our administrative team, where her dedication will be recognized and her voice heard. Angela's hand flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. The room erupted into claps, cheers, and even a few standing ovations. Jonathan's voice softened as he concluded. Yesterday reminded us all of something important. Greatness doesn't come from titles or positions. It comes from courage, honesty, and heart. And sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. In that moment, Riverside Tech wasn't just a company anymore. It was a family, forever changed by the bravery of a boy who dared to yell, "Don't get in the car." The applause in the main hall still echoed in everyone's ears long after Jonathan Hayes stepped away from the podium. Employees looked at Angela and Marcus with newfound respect. The boy who had once blended into the background was now a symbol of courage, and his mother, once unnoticed, stood in the spotlight, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. For Jonathan, the weight of the moment stayed with him even as he returned to his office. He had faced boardroom betrayals, industry rivals, and the constant pressure of leadership. But nothing had ever pierced through his armor the way Marcus's voice had. That one desperate shout had not only saved his life, but also reminded him of something he had forgotten. Leadership wasn't about power, it was about people. The following weeks brought sweeping changes. The Marcus Hayes Future Leader Scholarship became a widely celebrated initiative, drawing praise both inside and outside the company. Employees felt proud to work at Riverside Tech, knowing their CEO valued courage and humanity as much as profit. Angela's new role in administration was more than just a promotion. It was a transformation. For the first time in years, she walked through the halls without keeping her eyes down. Colleagues greeted her warmly, not as the cleaner, but as a respected member of the team. She often told Marcus at night, "You gave us a new life, son." And each time he would smile shyly, never fully realizing the depth of what he had done. But the most profound change was in Jonathan himself. Once known as a cold and distant leader, he became more approachable, often walking the halls to check on employees, greeting them by name. His board of directors noticed the shift, and so did the staff. The company that had once admired his strength now admired his heart. One afternoon, Jonathan invited Angela and Marcus to his office again. He handed Marcus a small, polished plaque engraved with the words, "For extraordinary courage. Marcus, 2025. This is just the beginning," Jonathan told him with a smile. "One day you might be sitting in a chair like mine, and when that day comes, remember, it's not about the power you hold. It's about the lives you touch." Marcus's eyes lit up, and Angela's tears flowed once more. For a boy who had once thought his voice didn't matter, the lesson was unforgettable. As the months rolled on, Riverside Tech grew stronger, not just in profits but in unity. Employees often told new hires, "This is the company where a cleaner's son saved the CEO. This is where courage is noticed." And for Jonathan, Angela, and Marcus, the memory of that morning in the parking lot never faded. It had started with fear, but ended with transformation. Because in that single urgent shout, "Don't get in the car," a child had not only saved a life, but had also reminded an entire company of the power of courage, truth, and humanity. From that day forward, Riverside Tech wasn't just a workplace, it was a story, and Marcus was the boy who made sure it would never be forgotten.